What happens when one of Britain's most respected actors walks onto a daytime talk show and gets ambushed by a host who thinks she can say whatever she wants? In just 29 seconds, a single comment from Denise Welch turned a friendly interview into television chaos that nobody saw coming. Colin Firth arrived at the Loose Women's studio that morning, expecting a standard promotional chat. He was there to discuss his latest film, answer a few light questions, maybe share a funny story or two, the kind of appearance he had done hundreds of times before. What he got instead was something completely different. The panel that day included Denise Welch, who was leading the interview, along with Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Jane Moore. The atmosphere started off pleasant enough. Colin sat down, smiled at the cameras, and exchanged pleasantries with the hosts. The audience applauded warmly. Everything seemed normal. Denise kicked things off with what appeared to be a friendly question. "Colin, lovely to have you here. Now, you have been in the industry for so long. Tell us, do you ever get tired of playing the same type of character over and over again?" It was a bit pointed, but Colin handled it gracefully. "Well, I think every role has its own unique challenges. I try to find something new in each character I play." Denise did not seem satisfied with that answer. She leaned forward, her expression shifting. "But come on, you have to admit, you have made a career out of playing the posh, repressed English gentleman. Is that not just a bit limiting?" The other panelists glanced at each other. Nadia looked uncomfortable. Kay raised her eyebrows. Jane shifted in her seat. Colin remained composed, though you could see a flicker of something in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe. Or surprise at the directness. "I would not say it is limiting," Colin responded carefully. "I have played a wide range of characters throughout my career. Some happen to be English, yes, but that does not mean they are all the same." Denise laughed, but it was not a warm laugh. It had an edge to it. "Oh, come on. We have all seen your films. You do the stuttering thing, the awkward thing, the tortured soul thing. It is basically the same performance with different costumes." The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension creeping into the studio. Nadia jumped in, clearly trying to redirect. "I think what Denise means is that you have found your niche, and you do it brilliantly. The King's speech was absolutely phenomenal, Colin. That performance was breathtaking." Colin nodded gratefully at Nadia. "Thank you. That role was particularly challenging because of the stammer. I worked with a speech coach for months to get it right." But Denise was not finished. She cut back in, talking over Nadia. "See, that is exactly what I am talking about. Another tortured, repressed character. Do you ever want to break out and do something completely different? Like an action film? Or a comedy where you are not the butt of the joke?" Kay tried to intervene. "Denise, I think Colin has actually done quite a bit of comedy. Bridget Jones's Diary had plenty of funny moments." Denise waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, that was just more of the same. The uptight boyfriend who cannot express his feelings. Hardly groundbreaking." Colin's jaw tightened. He was still maintaining his composure, but barely. "I chose that role because I connected with the character. Mark Darcy is more than just uptight. He is someone who struggles to communicate his emotions, and I think that is something many people relate to." Denise smirked. "Or maybe it is just easy for you, because it is not much of a stretch." The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members looked shocked. Nadia's mouth dropped open. Jane looked at Denise like she could not believe what she had just heard. Kay actually said, "Denise," in a warning tone. Colin stared at Denise for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but cold. "I am sorry. What exactly are you implying?" Denise seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I am not implying anything. I am just saying that maybe you play these roles because they come naturally to you. You know, a method acting and all that." Colin's expression hardened. "So you are suggesting that I am uptight and emotionally repressed in real life?" It was not a question. It was a statement. and Denise knew she was trapped. She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, do not be so sensitive. I am just having a bit of fun." But Colin was not laughing. "Fun? You invite me onto your show, insult my work, and then make personal attacks about my character. And you call that fun?" The other panelists were frozen. Nobody knew what to do. The producers off camera were probably having a meltdown. This was live television, and it was going off the rails fast. Denise tried to regain control. "Look, Colin, you are taking this completely the wrong way. I am a fan of your work. I was just trying to have an honest conversation about your career choices." Colin leaned back in his chair. "An honest conversation? You have spent the last 5 minutes telling me that I am a one-trick pony who plays myself in every role. That is not a conversation. That is an attack." Nadia jumped in again, desperately trying to salvage the situation. "Colin, let's talk about your new film. What drew you to this particular project?" But Colin was not ready to move on. He kept his eyes on Denise. "No, I would actually like Denise to explain herself. Because from where I am sitting, it seems like you had an agenda coming into this interview. You did not bring me here to talk about my work. You brought me here to tear me down." Denise's face flushed. "That is absolutely ridiculous. I treat all my guests with respect." Jane Moore finally spoke up. "Denise, maybe we should just move on to the next question." But Denise ignored her. She was clearly rattled now, and when Denise got rattled, she got defensive. "You know what, Colin? Maybe if you were not so uptight, you would be able to take a bit of criticism. This is what we do on this show. We have real, honest discussions. If you cannot handle that, maybe you should not have come." The audience gasped. Literally gasped. Kay put her hand over her face. Nadia looked like she wanted to disappear. Jane shook her head in disbelief. Colin stood up. Not quickly, not dramatically. He just calmly stood up and began to remove his microphone. Denise's eyes went wide. "What are you doing?" Colin did not look at her. He focused on unclipping the mic pack from his belt. "I am leaving." "You cannot just leave in the middle of an interview," Denise said, and there was a note of panic in her voice now. Colin finally looked at her. "Watch me." Nadia tried one last time. "Colin, please, let's just take a breath and start over." Colin's expression softened when he looked at Nadia. "I appreciate that, Nadia, and I want to be clear, but this has nothing to do with you, or Kay, or Jane. You have all been perfectly lovely. But I will not sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has no respect for me or my work." He placed the microphone on his chair and turned to walk off the set. Denise, in a last-ditch effort to maintain some control, called after him. "This is incredibly unprofessional, Colin." That stopped him. He turned around slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was ice. "Unprofessional? You want to talk about unprofessional? You ambushed a guest on live television. You made personal attacks. You insulted my entire career. And when I called you out on it, you told me I was too uptight to handle criticism. That is unprofessional, Denise. What I am doing right now is called having self-respect." The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Denise opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She had no response. There was nothing she could say. Colin looked at the other panelists. "Ladies, it was a pleasure meeting you. I am sorry this turned into such a spectacle." Then he looked at the audience. "And I apologize to all of you for cutting this short, but I think we can all agree that this was not the interview anyone expected." And with that, he walked off the stage. The cameras did not know what to do. They cut to a wide shot of the panel. Denise sat there, red-faced and speechless. Nadia looked mortified. Kay was staring at the table. Jane was shaking her head. After what felt like an eternity, Kay finally spoke. "Well, that was certainly something." Denise tried to recover. He completely overreacted. I was just asking legitimate questions. But Nadia was not having it. Denise, you basically called him a bad actor who plays himself in every role. What did you think was going to happen? I did not say that, Denise protested. Jane cut in. You absolutely said that. You said it was not much of a stretch for him to play uptight characters. That is a pretty clear insult. Denise looked around, realizing she was not going to get any support from her fellow panelists. I was just being honest. Isn't that what this show is about? Being honest? Kay sighed. There is a difference between being honest and being rude, Denise. And what you did crossed that line. The show cut to a commercial break, but the damage was done. Where in the span of less than 10 minutes, what should have been a simple promotional interview had turned into a complete disaster. Let's rewind and look at what actually happened here. Because this was not just a case of a celebrity being too sensitive or a host asking tough questions. This was a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview. From the very first question, Denise set a confrontational tone. Do you ever get tired of playing the same type of character over and over again? That is not an opening question. That is a challenge. That is you telling your guest that you think their work is repetitive and boring. Colin tried to give a diplomatic answer, but Denise kept pushing. She kept insisting that all his roles were the same, that he was just playing himself, that he was limited as an actor. These were not questions. They were accusations dressed up as questions. And here is the thing. Even if Denise genuinely believed that Colin Firth played similar characters, there are ways to explore that topic without being insulting. You could say, you have played several characters who struggle with emotional expression. What draws you to those types of roles? That is a legitimate question that allows for an interesting discussion. But that is not what Denise did. She went straight for the jugular. She made it personal. And when Colin pushed back, she told him he was being too sensitive. This is a tactic that bullies use all the time. They say something hurtful, and when the other person gets upset, they act like the victim. Oh, I was just joking. You are being too sensitive. Learn to take a joke. It is gaslighting, plain and simple. And the worst part? Denise tried to frame it as honest conversation. As if honesty gives you the right to be cruel. As if being direct means you can say whatever you want without consequences. But here is what Denise did not count on. Colin Firth is not someone who is going to sit there and take abuse. He is a respected actor with decades of experience. He has worked with some of the greatest directors in the world. He has won an Oscar. He does not need loose women. He does not need Denise Welch. And that is what made his exit so powerful. He did not yell. He did not throw a tantrum. He did not storm off in a rage. He simply stood up, removed his microphone, and left. With dignity. With class. And with a few well-chosen words that made it crystal clear why he was leaving. I will not sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has no respect for me or my work. That is not the statement of someone who is being oversensitive. That is the statement of someone who knows their worth and refuses to be disrespected. And when Denise called him unprofessional, his response was perfect. He laid out exactly what she had done wrong. He called her out for ambushing him, for making personal attacks, for being disrespectful. And he did it without raising his voice or losing his temper. That is what made Colin the clear hero of this situation. He stood up for himself without being cruel. He set a boundary without being aggressive. He maintained his composure even when Denise was trying to provoke him. Meanwhile, Denise looked worse and worse with every passing second. She could not admit she was wrong. She could not apologize. She just kept defending herself and blaming Colin for overreacting. Even her fellow panelists turned on her, which tells you everything you need to know about how badly she handled the situation. Nadia's comment was particularly telling. You basically called him a bad actor who plays himself in every role. What did you think was going to happen? That was not just a criticism of Denise's behavior. That was an acknowledgement that what Denise did was out of line. Even her friends could see it. And Jane's distinction between being honest and being rude was spot on. Honesty without kindness is just cruelty. You can tell the truth without being mean. You can ask tough questions without being disrespectful. Denise either did not know that or did not care. The audience reaction throughout this whole debacle was fascinating too. They started off applauding Colin. Then they went silent when Denise started attacking him. They gasped when she doubled down. Adores, and you could feel their sympathy shift entirely to Colin as the interview fell apart. Because audiences are smart. They can tell when someone is being genuine and when someone is being a bully. They can sense when a line has been crossed. And they absolutely crossed the line here. Think about what Colin must have been feeling in those moments. He came to the studio expecting a normal interview. Maybe he was a little tired. Maybe he had done 5 other interviews that day. But he showed up, and he was polite. He was ready to talk about his work. And then this host starts tearing into him, questioning his talent, mocking his career choices, suggesting he is just playing himself because he cannot do anything else. And doing all of this in front of a live studio audience and television cameras. Most people would have gotten angry. Most people would have snapped back. Most people would have made the situation worse. But Colin kept his cool. He asked Denise to explain herself. He pointed out what she was doing. He gave her multiple chances to back down. She did not take any of them. She just kept going, kept pushing, kept insulting, until finally Colin had enough. And when he left, he did not burn any bridges unnecessarily. He specifically said that the other panelists had been lovely. He apologized to the audience. He was a gentleman right up until the moment he walked out that door. Compare that to Denise, who immediately went on the defensive, who tried to make herself the victim, who claimed Colin overreacted when everyone watching could see that his reaction was completely justified. This is what happens when someone who is used to getting away with bad behavior finally meets someone who will not tolerate it. Denise clearly thought she could say whatever she wanted because she was the host. She had the power. She controlled the conversation. But power only works if the other person acknowledges it. And Colin did not. And he refused to play along. He refused to sit there and be humiliated. And in doing so, he completely undermined Denise's authority. The moment he stood up and removed that microphone, the power dynamic shifted. Suddenly, Denise was not in control anymore. She was scrambling. She was panicking. You could hear it in her voice when she said, "You cannot just leave in the middle of an interview." Oh, but he could, and he did. And that "watch me more" response? Absolutely perfect. 2 words that conveyed so much. Confidence, defiance, strength. It was the verbal equivalent of a mic drop. Even Denise's attempt to call him unprofessional backfired spectacularly. Because by that point, everyone watching knew exactly who had been unprofessional. And it was not Colin. His final speech before leaving was the nail in the coffin. He summarized everything Denise had done wrong. He made it clear that he was leaving because she had disrespected him, not because he could not handle criticism. And he did it in a way that was articulate, measured, and devastating. What I am doing right now is called having self-respect. That line is going to be remembered, because it perfectly encapsulates why Colin was in the right. This was not about being thin-skinned. This was about refusing to accept mistreatment. And let's be real, the fact that even the other Loose Women panelists sided with Colin tells you everything. These are Denise's colleagues. These are people who work with her every day, and they still called her out for her behavior. Nadia's mortified expression throughout the latter half of the interview spoke volumes. She knew this was a disaster. She tried multiple times to redirect the conversation, to give Colin an out, to move past the awkwardness. But Denise would not let it go. Kay's attempts to defend Colin's comedy work were shut down by Denise. Jane's suggestion to move to the next question was ignored. They all saw what was happening, and they all knew it was wrong. And then, after Colin left, they did not rally around Denise. They did not support her version of events. They called her out. They said she crossed the line. They made it clear that this was her fault. That must have been humiliating for Denise. To have a guest walk out on you is bad enough. But to have your own co-hosts turn on you afterward? That's a complete collapse of whatever authority or credibility she thought she had. The whole thing lasted less than 10 minutes from start to finish. 10 minutes to completely destroy what should have been a pleasant interview. 10 minutes to reveal exactly what kind of person Denise Welch was when she thought she had the upper hand. But those 10 minutes also revealed what kind of person Colin Firth was. Someone who will not tolerate disrespect. Someone who knows his worth. Someone who can stand up for himself with grace and dignity. In the end, Colin walked away from that interview with his reputation intact. Actually, more than intact. Enhanced. Because people respect someone who has boundaries. People respect someone who will not be pushed around. Denise, on the other hand, walked away looking petty, mean-spirited, and utterly unable to admit when she was wrong. She wanted to have an honest conversation. But what she really wanted was to tear down a successful actor for no apparent reason other than her own ego. And that is the real tragedy here. This could have been a great interview. Colin Firth is a fascinating person with a long and varied career. There were so many interesting questions Denise could have asked. So many genuine conversations they could have had. But instead, she chose confrontation. She chose cruelty. Maawas. She chose to make it about her and her need to be provocative, rather than about the guest and his work. And it backfired spectacularly. Because Colin Firth is not someone you can push around. He is not going to smile and nod while you insult him. He is going to stand up, look you in the eye, tell you exactly why what you are doing is wrong, and walk away. That is what having self-respect looks like. That is what setting boundaries looks like. That is what happens when someone who thinks they can say whatever they want finally meets someone who will not let them get away with it. Denise learned that lesson the hard way, in front of a live studio audience, on television, with her own colleagues calling her out. And Colin Firth, he just removed his microphone and left. Because some conversations are not worth having. Some people are not worth your time. And some situations are best handled by simply walking away. 29 seconds. That is all it took for Denise to destroy the interview with one comment about method acting. And the next several minutes were just the inevitable collapse that followed. But Colin gave her chances. He asked her to explain herself. He pointed out what she was doing. He remained calm and composed, even as she continued to attack him. She could have apologized at any point. She could have said, "You know what? I think I phrased that poorly. Let me try again." She could have acknowledged that she had crossed a line and moved on. But she did not. She doubled down. She got defensive. She tried to make Colin the problem instead of taking responsibility for her own behavior. And that is why this moment became legendary. Not because a celebrity walked off a talk show. That has happened before. But because of how it happened. Because of the clear contrast between Colin's dignity and Denise's pettiness. Every moment of that interview showed exactly who these two people were. Denise, desperate to be provocative, willing to insult a guest to get attention. Colin, calm and measured, willing to stand up for himself without stooping to her level. In the end, the interview that was supposed to be about Colin's new film became about something much bigger. About respect. About boundaries. About what happens when someone refuses to be a victim. Colin Firth walked onto that stage as a respected actor. He walked off as a hero to anyone who has ever been bullied, insulted, or disrespected, and wished they had the courage to just stand up and leave. And Denise Welch sat at that desk, red-faced and speechless, as her fellow panelists called her out, and the audience sat in stunned silence. That is the power of knowing your worth. That is what happens when you refuse to accept mistreatment. And that is why this moment will be remembered long after the name of Colin's film has been forgotten. Because this was not about a movie. This was about dignity. And dignity, as Colin Firth proved that day, is worth fighting for.